out where all the dollars go, and it's in a small municipality. And a lot of people talk about local control and being able to prioritize and put money where it needs to go. Is that a major advantage of being a municipality, and what are maybe some challenges that people don't think about when they think about running a smaller government?
Well, first off, thanks for inviting me here. I'm not here to advocate one side or the other, and I honestly don't know enough about the particulars of the landings. There's a lot of unique qualities to the landings in Skidaway that we don't have out at Tybee. However, there are a lot of similarities, and I hope that what I share with you will help inform you a little bit going forward as to how you're going to vote on this. But running a municipality is a huge challenge, especially when you're in a coastal environment and you deal with hurricanes. You want to make sure that you have sufficient money in the bank to cover. What we got hit with Matthew was a brush. That was nothing. That was a Cat 1 in Chatham County, only on a small sliver of Tybee, and look at the destruction that did in terms of debris and all that. And then, of course, Irma was bad in terms of the flooding. So that's one thing that I think we share in common with this area, whether it's incorporated or not, is that you really have to make sure that you have enough money in the bank to deal with the possibility of getting hit with something like a Hurricane Michael. We saw the destruction. What was that, Carolina? What was that beach down in Florida that just got absolutely destroyed?
Wilmington Beach and that area.
All that area down there was just destroyed. So we have to be prepared for that. But yeah, it's a big challenge because you're looking at, you got to provide police, you got to provide fire, and then you have enterprise funds. We have to deal with water, sewer. That's a whole nother ball of wax. And dealing with EPD, there's unfunded mandates that come down from above that you have to comply with. For example, making sure that when you take your sewage discharge, it goes in the Savannah River. In our case, that is at a certain quality, and that keeps changing, and they're making it more stringent, so you continue to have to invest in that system. But Tybee's been blessed to have some really good. Pat's been wonderful for I think you've been our commissioner since I've been mayor, and he's been very supportive.
And a couple of years before that.
How long have you been doing this, Pat?
15 years.
15, okay. So we've been lucky, and we've also have good reps. I had Burke Day to work with for a while, and now I have Ben and Jesse, and they've been phenomenal because there are times when a municipality will need help from the county, from the state, or from the feds, and we've been very lucky that they've been able to provide support for us, beach renourishment and other things that you all don't necessarily have to deal with. So,
Tom, you're in a unique position. When you were the head of the MPC, you were dealing with both city and county officials and more on the planning and zoning and engineering side, but there's a lot of work involved with that in trying to balance county needs, city needs, unincorporated needs, city of Savannah. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you to go ahead and extrapolate into smaller municipalities. I know that wasn't necessarily part of your purview, but I think you probably have some insights there. What are the keys to getting everybody to work together if you are a small entity?
Well, just a footnote, the MPC was funded with SSD funds. So
there you go.
Never enough money. Well, that's a interesting question. How we interrelated with all the jurisdictions as staff instead of the Metropolitan Planning Commission, we also staff the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Right, MPO.
Some people you may know it as CORE or Coastal Region MPO, and that's really a federal creation to do transportation planning in an urban area that through the process projects get approved by a local board and then become eligible for federal funding. So I know the mayor knows this because you were very involved in that. And so it's really tough to get the right players around the table. I mean, typically an MPO should be the elected officials, but our MPO was mainly staff. So that was a challenge to get the elected officials tuned in on this part of it. But I think maybe a broader question is related to this is, what does new city need to do relating to planning? And there's a couple, statewide acts that cover this, and in a planning act and so on. But basically, you need a comprehensive plan. and that plan has certain elements you need to address. You need public involvement, and goals, objectives, and various other elements, perhaps a capital improvement element. It varies with the size of your city, and the requirements vary. For a very small city, you can negotiate what you have to do. So that's a comprehensive plan. You need a zoning ordinance, even though, like in Skidaway, it's probably a fairly simple document, but you still need that ordinance to back up any changes that may occur in land use on the islands. And you have to think about how you're going to administer that. You know, in Hillsborough County, in Hillsborough County and here, they had a planning commission, and the planning commission reviewed stuff, and then the things that need to be approved by the elected body went to them for approval. So zoning, for example, has to be done by the elected representatives. And do you want to have? Does the new council want to have all of the decisions made at council, or at least be the first stop for those decisions, or do they want a citizens group, for example, a planning commission, to look at it and comment on it, filter it, work it, make it ready for the council to apply its political decision-making process? So those are some of the planning things that are needed. Need staff to do that. You can hire that staff, or you can contract with that staff. I think you'll find some of the new cities have contracted for those services in other places. So, but that's a quick overview of planning. And of course, you have to get everybody to agree to those things, and that's really the gist of it.
All right. And that's where I want to come back to you.
And that's a great intergovernmental agreement where the Chatham County Commissioners and the City of Savannah got together and decided to have to work with this board and fund it, so that a lot of the legwork can be done and they can make a recommendation to the City Council of Savannah or the County Commission, and they pretty much give us the executive summary, and it makes it expedites trying to move forward on zoning changes and that sort of thing. When somebody comes in with a project that may not quite fit the existing zoning, and they work out all the details of how to work with all the neighbors and that sort of thing. So that's a real big successful intergovernmental agreement where the county works with all the municipalities at all the time to make everything work.
Let's stick with zoning there for a minute. Jason, I know zoning is always a consideration at Tybee. It seems like that's a pretty key issue in every election is you guys have pretty strict rules on heights and building masses and sizes, and somebody will campaign on that and somebody will campaign against it. For whatever reason, you guys have been very successful in kind of keeping it all kind of reined in. What does it take in terms of senior leadership to try to kind of keep everybody focused on the goal of keeping the community going in the right direction? Patience, alcohol.
Patience. We have a planning commission that provides executive summaries, essentially, like you're talking about, and staff that really help guide those decisions. I remember when I was first elected in 2001, it was we had some crazy fights over development and can you go above 35 feet and this, that, and the other, and a lot of that stuff resolved itself when the financial crisis hit in 2008, and we're just starting to see some of that come back, you know. So but specific to Tybee, we've been lucky that this has nothing to do with landings, but I'll share it with you. Years ago, our fire trucks and engines couldn't reach above 35 feet. So they put a thing in there that said you can't go above 35 feet. And that's what's kept Tybee from becoming Daytona, basically, is that we've stuck with that. And that's like a sacrosanct thing now, that we do not violate that 35-foot variance or height standard. And that's because if we did, if anybody voted for that, they would not get reelected, you know? And I think that's important, is the people on Tybee who are elected are accountable to the voters. And I've seen personally, firsthand, people who were maybe a little bit too extreme on one side or on the more restrictive side, you know, lose their reelection. Yeah. But Tybee has a lot of turnover in our government because we have the highest voter participation rate in the county by far. We have 65% of people show up for votes for elections, just for municipal elections, and I think that is what keeps us from becoming,
you're accountable to your constituents.
Which is great.
Good.
And I don't necessarily see that. I'm not talking about Chatham County necessarily. I don't necessarily see that in a lot of other counties and municipalities. I'll put it to you that way.
I think you could lose that title if this were to pass next week. From what I've seen with the folks at Skidaway are very, very engaged. Pat, along those same lines, you're somebody that lives on the island. The Skidaway's very unique, very residential.
Yep.
Very master planned, at least within the different subdivisions.
Yeah, probably the most master planned subdivision in the county is started 40 years ago and is still going very strong.
Right. So when we're talking about planning, zoning, engineering, there's not a lot of stuff to do that to, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done, right? How do you go about making those adjustments?
Well, my suggestion should any municipality be set up in the 4th District is to start off with the existing zoning that's there now and just blanketly adopt that for your city. As time goes forward, there'll be challenges to your city council, should there become a city council, just like there's challenges to the city of Savannah, to Tybee, to the county commissioners, that tweaks and changes will be requested, and some of them get approved and some of them don't. And so that would be how I would suggest that any municipality start out. Just completely start out with what you got and carry that forward until such time as there's a reason to address it. Otherwise, just stay with what you got.
Tom, we were talking before we came up here a little bit about Skidaway Island and the whole idea of a lot of the subdivisions. They have their own covenants. They operate under their own kind of planning guidelines. When you switch to a municipality, how much could that potentially complicate things? And especially if you got, whether there's 6 different subdivisions at three different subdivisions at Skidaway, and then a commercial district. Private, yes. How does that complicate when you look at zoning and enforcement and that kind of thing?
Well, my recollection is the Land Incorporation is basically their own zone, planned development, and I think that would have to be a debate on what you do with that. Do you turn all the? I think Pat's suggestion for most of the properties are to accept the current zoning that's on that property. I think it makes a lot of sense. Stick with what it is, and then worry about changes as circumstances change. But I think that would have to be a discussion between if there's a new municipality and the Land Use Corporation about how all that works and what are the benefits and so on. Even though there's pretty much established development there, I mean the Landings did this strategic planning, the thing with ULI a year or so ago. And I understand there's considerable acres of undeveloped land there. Some of it might be lots, but some of it could be assembled. And you got the golf courses, are they viable over a long time? It's a hunk of land that could be developed. So my point there, I'm not saying it should.
That's heresy there, right?
Yeah, right. My point there is things could happen that would greatly affect the character, at least areas around the golf course for sure, that if a city, was there, you'd have to make sure you had your planning and principles and zoning and comprehensive plan so people knew what the baseline was for making decisions. And those things are important to establish, and the answer to your question is subject to negotiations, I think, once the decision's made.
Most everything is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Jason, I think you guys at Tybee, you have one gated community, so that's not necessarily something that you guys have to deal with. Does that make zoning and code enforcement, and let's not get into trash cans and which side they got to be on which side of the house on which days, but I have a feeling that's probably what your phone and your email fills up with the most, right? Is residential complaints about various things that are on the books that they don't like it or that aren't being enforced to their liking?
Honestly, my phone rings more in the summer because the 2,991 people who live there are living in a community where 40,000 people come out every Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, they
and
can't
you got
park.
Trash and parking, and people are parking in people's yards and all of that, which you would not have unless you all built a beach somewhere, a really big beach, other than Butterbean. But you know, it is. I would think if this were to happen, it would be easier from a zoning perspective than it is for Tybee because we don't have those private communities that have their own protocols and have their own rules. But that is a challenge for us. But we have a very good and stable zoning department. For years, we had just turnover because it was such a political thing that the person in the zoning department, leading the zoning department, was always getting in trouble from one side or the other. We call them the tree huggers and the sand bubbas on Tybee is what they used to call them. Kind of the pro-development versus the don't build anything else. So that person's office would get politicized and we'd lose them. Every 6 months to a year, we'd have turnover. And we're lucky now we have somebody in place who's stabilized things. And that's an important point is you have to hire really good staff. And that's a big challenge for municipalities and counties, I would imagine, to hire good people who are going to be there. Well, I think the county has done a pretty good job with their team, I think. In Tybee, we're blessed that we have some good people there now that are sort of kind of protecting the elected officials, I think, in a sense, by guiding us the right way.
Well, like I said earlier, it's a intergovernmental agreement between the city of Savannah and the county, and then we turn it over to Metropolitan Planning Commission. I'm sure that if another municipality, any of them wanted to join in, that a deal could be made, whether it's Pooler or Tybee or Skidaway or what have you. So
I offered.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of options is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of options on how do you get from point A to point
Right.
B,
Yeah.
and it's up to your city council to, if there is a new city council, to decide, what's the best route, because there are unique features to Tybee versus Pooler versus, say, Skidaway Island. They have unique features, but that also gives your city council the opportunity to address issues germane to them, such as weekends having 40,000 of your best friends come and visit you for 3 or 4 months in a row. Skidaway has other issues. Pooler has different issues, and that's some of the aspects of being a municipality that you can zero in on what's important to your constituents. If you're in the unincorporated area, one size fits all. I've got to be it's very difficult to, for instance, pick one side of town where the expectations for cutting the grass more than 3 times a year are expected, and other sides of town where 3 times a year is a shrug of the shoulders. But boy, let me try to get the grass cut a few extra times on Wilmington Island or somewhere, and then I'm going to hear it from a commissioner on the other side of town. Well, what about us? So you cannot, when you got 90,000 people and one size fits all on some situations, it's more difficult to provide the level of service that that your citizenry would like. We've got private communities in Southbridge and at the landings that apparently don't think they have enough police service because they hire off-duty policemen on a regular basis to do extra patrols. Well, if the area in Southbridge were part of a city, they might be more likely to provide more patrols from their city police provider. And the same with Skidaway. Whatever their decision was for going to having police, then they could tailor that amount of police service a little differently. But when you're 90,000 people, you don't get real specific in your patrol. One size tends to kind of, they go to where the most problems are, and everybody gets kind of the same even-handed amount of service.
I'm going to digress on that for a minute because you mentioned Southbridge. It's interesting that Southbridge is a community that voted for annexation, and then the city that they wanted to annex them didn't take them, and maybe it has to do because of the policing.
And again, every geographic area and group of citizens have different wants and needs, and that's the big process. Is how do you try to get the balance in there to meet those responsibly.
I'm going to do one more thing, and then we're going to give these guys a short break and then come back and take some of the questions that have been submitted here. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about revenue. Whenever anybody talks about revenue and they look at feasibility studies, whether they're for Skidaway or for the Chatham Islands, they look at the loss distributions. And, of course, we know the loss is the penny sales tax that we all pay on goods and services. And every 10 years it's renegotiated, and it's not necessarily broken up by population or how much goods and services are sold in your geographic area. It's more of a negotiation, and I know that both Pat and Jason have been part of those negotiations. And I just kind of leave it wide open for you guys. I don't know which one of you wants to take it first. Is what do you go into those negotiations expecting, and where do you have leverage or where do you have give in terms of trying to do what's best for your constituents?
I'll start.
Well, on the lost, I feel like we have zero leverage, basically. And we kind of get a cut based on the percentage of the county that our population represents, which is about 1%. And, of course, I, as the mayor of my little city, am going to fight tooth and nail to get more, obviously. And I feel like we do have more leverage with the 6%, which is the special purpose local option sales tax, because that is one that the voters have to approve. And if we raise a stink because we don't get enough of the cut, then at least we have that little bit of leverage with trying to get maybe the public not as to support the SPLOST, because if it doesn't get approved by the voters, then nobody gets their money. So the lost negotiation is not much we can do about that, as much as I would like to be more involved and have more leverage. The SPLOST, we've been a little bit more successful. But I will also say that brings up the unincorporated thing, because whatever extra cut Tybee gets is that less of a cut that everybody else gets, unincorporated or Savannah or anybody else. So,
and I think a key thing to remember with the lost is that money can be used for your general fund. SPLOST is earmarked for certain projects, so
Capital.
it can't be used for ongoing.
It has to be capital.
Capital
right.
expenses.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So from the county's perspective, and again, I'll reference that I represent I have the district that has the largest percentage of unincorporated residents. The way Lost was set up many, many, many years ago, and the way it's come down, the unincorporated area for the special service district is categorically excluded from all lost money. We don't get one penny. Okay, 90,000 people in Chatham County pay the same sales tax as everybody else and our visitors, but when it comes time to take that pie and cut off a slice to pay for city-like services, you can only get it if you are a municipality only. So the unincorporated area, to pay for police and public works, which are our two big heavy hitters in our budget. There's a whole litany, an armful of other things, but I just want to mention those two for conversation's sake. We get zero. So you got 90,000 people that live there. Every time they buy a stick of chewing gum or a new car or a washing machine, the fifth penny on their sales tax goes into that pot. Now, there's a whole list of items that are put up there for cities to negotiate with. But at the end of the day, if the cities can't agree, you go to an absent municipality. And that's why Mayor Buelterman said it doesn't. There's no wiggle room, because for him to get more money and lost, other municipality has to get less. So at the end of the day, if your population of your city increases, and we'll see a huge increase in Pooler's population, they will get a bigger piece of pie when we renegotiate after the census in 2021, 2022.
And that's what happened in 2011, just for the record.
And that's what happened. So that means everybody else's piece gets proportionately smaller. If you take a segment of the unincorporated area and it becomes a municipality, now they're entitled to a slice of the pie. A pie that they've been paying into since the inception of this tax 40 years ago, that they haven't gotten 1 penny of use. Now, I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated. The county, and this is where I lose a lot of people, the county does get some lost money. And the lost money that we get has to go to countywide expenses. We can't spend a dime of it for an unincorporated policeman or an unincorporated road or ditch or any of that. But we can spend it on our libraries, because that's open to everybody. We could put it on Parks and Recreation, which is countywide. We have a lot of parks that are in the unincorporated area. We got a lot that are in cities. So they're all over. Everybody's welcome to use them. And we have a jail and a sheriff's department, which is countywide. So the last negotiation, the county commissioners tried to get a bigger share, took it all the way to court, and basically even the judge said, everybody's going to get about what you had before. We're not going to move the dial. And if your cities aren't going to move the dial for you, they kind of shrugged their shoulders and just kind of said, it's just going to stay this way. So
would it be fair, though, to say that you have a little bit more leverage at the table, though, with that kind of population? I mean, you said that they were about the same, but I think the county
when the
picked
county
up
commission
quite
goes
a
to the
bit.
table, we have 250,000 people.
Mm-hmm. It's not carved out.
The 90,000 isn't even talked about. They don't count. You're no count on lost. You get nothing, you have no voice. So you're categorically denied a revenue stream. The only way you can get that revenue stream is if you incorporate. Now, each of the 2 feasibility studies that I looked over, one for the Chatham Isles and one for Skidaway Isles, they specifically indicate, from Carl Vinson or whoever did the study up in North Georgia, how much approximately, when you calculate the lost municipality, what your share will be. And I have no doubt that that's approximately what a new municipality is going to get.
Okay.
But right. That's a huge recurring revenue service, because at 1 penny is splossed in Chatham County, give or take, any given year, good years and bad years, we average about low 60s to mid $60 million per year. So a penny of e-splost, a penny of lost, a penny of lost splost or e-splost, they all raise about 60, 65 million a year. And they all have different categories that they can be spent in. But when you're just talking, since we're talking about municipality and corporation, that's a big recurring revenue that your city council will have access to every single year that you do not have access now, nor will you ever get it in my lifetime.
I have a question for the commissioner. You purported to, or supported rather, trying to get, was it the utility tax, or that only goes to local jurisdictions and not to the county?
See, well, he hadn't got to that yet, but
okay.
Franchise fees is another sore spot for the unincorporated residents, which I represent so many of. Everybody pays a franchise fees on your Cablevision. The unincorporated area does get that 5% of your cable bill. It goes to the general fund. I haven't seen it in the budget yet where it specifically goes to something in the unincorporated area. It goes to the Public Information Office, which is countywide. So if you had a city, that cable would go to your city and they could fund whatever they felt like. and that's a fact. So the second one is your electricity franchise fee. That's gets collected by everybody in the county. It goes to Atlanta, it comes back, and they disperse it to all the municipalities. The county doesn't see a penny of that, the unincorporated area or the county itself. And the other one is the natural gas franchise fee, or whatever. That one goes up there, and it goes to all the cities in Chatham County. So you got 90,000 people that are categorically excluded from 2 recurring revenue sources. And I tried years ago to try to change it, and I found out real quick in Atlanta, listen, that's just how we do it in this state, and you don't have a chance. When GMA hears that you want to give some of that franchise fee to the county,
They go nuts.
They go nuts, because most counties in this state have no SSD tax. So most counties, if you live in the unincorporated area, you pay one county tax, and whatever they give you, all the people in your city has to help pay for it. That doesn't work in Chatham County, because we have a hybrid system. So.
And I just want to clarify, this has been a pet peeve of mine for a while. People assume that if you go to Tybee and you buy a Snickers bar, right? You don't pay $1 for it. You pay $1.07 because there's a 7% sales tax. And so people assume that that 7 cents or a portion of it just automatically stays on Tybee. That's not how it works. If there's, this isn't the case, but if 40% of all the sales tax revenue was generated by Tybee, that doesn't mean that we would get 40% of the revenue. That's not how it works. You got a 7%, you got 4% state. The 5th is the loss. The 6th is, which is the worst acronym for a tax in human history, the local option sales tax, a loss. And then there's the SPLOST, and then there's the eSPLOST, and that's it. And that just all goes, the state goes to the state, the loss and the SPLOST goes to the county, and that gets distributed based on an agreement that we reach or whatever. And then the 7th one goes to the school system to build schools and provide technology for the schools and stuff. So.
Yeah. So in the lost negotiation, there is words that say it. You can, all these different criteria, but when you get down to brass tacks, nobody's giving an inch. Savannah's not giving anything to Tybee. Tybee's not giving anything to Bloomingdale. They're just going right back to absent municipality, and they go on population. When the population changes every 10 years, if your population goes up, you get more than you got for the last 10 years. If it goes down, you get less. That was something that was very detrimental to Garden City many years ago, because they were very proud of the fact they didn't have a city tax on property. They had a lot of different other ways to raise revenue, which we're all familiar with, but their population went down, and their share of local option sales tax went down, and they just couldn't make it work anymore, and they had to introduce a millage on their property for a city tax. And that's just some history. And again, there's so many nuanced things that go on in all these cities and within the county. There's just a lot of different things out there, but that's just one of them.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give these three a little bit of a break, and of course, you all can refill your glasses or what have you. And I'm going to bring up somebody here from Castaways. I don't know if Chef Kirk or Heather's going to come up, and we're going to talk to them for just a couple of minutes and let these guys recharge, and then we'll come back with some questions from the audience. Jason's not going to kill himself getting out of the...
No, please no. Red one out's killing you.
No, they're not too bad. They're not too bad. You want one up here? Yeah. So joining me right now is Chef Kirk and Heather here from Castaways. First of all, thank you for hosting us. And
yeah, our pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I know that you guys are on Sandfly, but a lot of your clientele is Skidaway. So what do you think of some of the conversation you've heard?
First, thank you for allowing us and giving us the honor of being able to host this. And second of all, we are extremely grateful to all of the members and the residents of the landings, because they do support local, and we see most of them at least once a week, if not more. So as much as we'd love to have an opinion, just being here on Isle of Hope and having a business here in Sandfly, we like everybody.
Yeah, it's good to spectate, right?
Yeah.
Yes, one thing I've learned is as a restaurateur not to have an opinion, to stay very neutral and be accepting of everyone coming in. But this is definitely an interesting conversation to watch, and no matter what the outcome, we'll always be here. This is really interesting because I have a lot of friends who are now moving out to Skidaway Island, so there's a younger influence and generation coming out there that have families that work in Savannah who use a lot of the amenities out there on the island, and a lot of questions are raised on the amenities like the golf courses, the marinas, public access through the gates, and all these different topics are coming up out of the woodwork on how they're going to be addressed or issued, or how private the island is going to remain if then it becomes a city. So this is a very interesting conversation, and we're just happy to have everyone here to be able to hash out any of the details.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about Castaways. I know it's a bit of an institution out here, and you're one of the more respected chefs in town. Give us a little brief history and tell us about what kind of
Castaways has been so fun to put together. It's a great partnership with Heather Ulmer, Jim Cole, and myself, who all have common interest in fishing of different kinds. And my expertise is in cooking the fish. So being able to plan and execute a well-rounded and approachable menu that has a fun, casual atmosphere is just a dream come true. We are thrilled with every single thing on the menu, and all of our guests that come in to really enjoy the laid-back environment with wonderful service and food quality that hit the table. We're open here 7 days a week for everyone to come and enjoy our delicious treats. So, doors are always wide open.
And the gnats are free.
The gnats are free.
Definitely.
The gnats are free. For those that might want to come out tonight, any kind of specials?
Yes, we've been doing wonderful specials with black grouper, which I'm getting out of Venezuela. One of the interesting things is the hemorrhaging South American economy is pushing a lot of seafood into North America. So we're getting fantastic black grouper and snapper and different types of species of fish and varietals that are coming up that we haven't been able to work with before at prices that are now approachable for us to get in. So we're able to actually buy this terrific seafood and put it on our menus and really play with it and have fun. We've been tearing through some old world dishes such as our grouper pontchartrain, which is an old New Orleans style dish. So it's been real fun to kind of take a couple steps back in the decades of cooking and then use modern plating to approach some of these old world dishes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you again for having us, and we'll put you in a rotation, and hopefully you'll have us back down the road.
Oh yeah, this is fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
What
And
time
if you
is
need
it?
to, if
No,
you need,
that's okay.
if you need
I
to
can be a
pop
little
out,
late.
don't
It's
hesitate.
not a rush, we won't be.
That's another topic. We're coming back now. I appreciate everybody turning in their questions. We got a nice thick stack here. And I think we're going to start with one from Tom, but I think he has it for Pat, who is wandering over now. So, Tom, fire away.
Well, I think the city of Savannah has annexed a lot of areas over my tenure here, mainly doing water deals with the developers. But my question is, say Skidaway becomes a city, and the SSD money would be collected through a city tax instead of by you all, by the county. Does the county view that as a negative, a plus for the county, or is it still a negative in terms of the other costs you have? In other words, do you still have more expenses for whatever expenses you might have spent in the Skidaway area, and you lose all of the property tax value of that? But your costs are greater some other areas that I guess the county, have they thought about it? Is it viewed as positive or negative?
The county looks at each year as a budget year,
Yeah.
and we look at recurring revenue, the tax digest, and then, so we have recurring revenue, tax digest, and then we have services to provide, and how much is that going to cost? And
Right.
each year we do a budget, we have to reconcile the two.
Right.
So, again, like you mentioned earlier, anytime on the west side that a property that was in the unincorporated area, after it has a hotel or a big neighborhood or something, then it usually gets annexed into a city. So it comes out of the unincorporated area. That happens all the time. And if you look at a map of Chatham County and you look at the municipalities, it looks like somebody took a paintball gun and shot Savannah in the middle, and it splattered it all over the western part of the county. It's so fragmented, it's very difficult to provide services out there because it's not geographically manageable from a public safety point of view, or it from fire. It's just hard for people to know who responds to what because it's so difficult to understand. So it happens all the time. We sometimes, some years we build stuff like, for instance, the unincorporated area has all the islands except for Tybee. Well, one of the biggest building projects in our county's history is going on Elba Island, and they're putting over a two or 3 year period, they're investing over $1 billion.
$2 billion total, yeah.
Okay, so you're talking a tax digest that's going to really ramp up for the unincorporated area, for the school board, and for the cat tax. I mean, whatever they're subject to, because none of that tax digest is exempt. That, whatever their valuation is fairly determined, they'll have to pay property tax, just like Joe has to on his 7-Eleven, and Bill has to on his house, and Mary on her restaurant. Whatever it's valued at, you pay the property tax.
Yeah, Tom asked an interesting question, because as somebody who lives in Wilmington, Iowa, and that was my question, is if you carve off 8,000, it's not 8,000 property owners, but however many property owners, that drops your revenue, right? But do your expenses drop commensurate to that? Probably not.
Well, they should.
Okay.
But of course, nothing does.
All right.
There's, nothing does.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it should, but it doesn't work that way. There's some historical donor areas, and there's some historical receiving areas that receive more services than what their area pays for.
Right.
But again, there's also a lot of different sources for revenue, especially for cities, that the counties do not have.
Well, let's talk about some of those right now. Here's our first question. We have been told that a new city can opt out of lost negotiations, and if so, will be assured of a share of lost funds based on its population in the last census. Is this correct? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Opt out?
Opt out.
And just get whatever your percentage is relative to the county.
Thing we talked about a little earlier.
Default to, I think, might be the more correct term. Default to the whatever they get. Yeah.
They're still getting their money.
Yeah, they're still getting their money, right?
It's called an absent municipality, so they default to population. Again, there's a whole litany of things that cities can negotiate with one another. But historically, what's happened is everybody defaults to population because nobody wants to, because they know that's their baseline. And in order to get more, somebody has to get less. There's just not any wiggle room.
Right, which drives Tybee crazy. I don't mean to interrupt. Drives us crazy because we got 40,000 people out there, most of whom are from Chatham County, who come to Tybee on Saturdays and Sundays, and a short-term rental population. All these people who are tourists, and they're all paying taxes, but we only get
$4 an hour for parking.
Yeah. Parking tickets. You make a fortune in parking tickets, Jason.
I don't know about that. Doesn't cover our expenses. I'll put it that way.
Your lifeguards
Truly,
and everything
$1 million
else.
in a year is not a fortune for a municipality.
Yeah, especially when you got lifeguards and everything else you got to pay for. Like
But on Jason, remember, there's 90,000 people that are making your pie in the city of Savannah's pie and Bloomingdale's pie and Pooler's pie a little bit bigger.
And it's appreciated.
And let's not that it doesn't get much press time at Adam. Just letting you know, there's 90,000 people helping out the cities whether they want to or not.
I'm one of
on
them.
a very regular basis.
I'm one of them. You're my commissioner, so be nice. So Vernonburg, I don't have the map in front of me. Is Vernonburg one of yours?
No.
Okay. You have any idea how they get their share of lost money?
If I
I think they like have 137 people or something like that.
187,
Whatever that is.
137.
what do they get, 200,000 a year or something?
Yeah, I think they get. Yeah.
And then they contract for services with Chatham County for their police, and
They basically do the same thing that Skidaway would do on a much smaller scale.
again, the options are unlimited to what a city and the county can negotiate. Whatever those two can agree to, whether it's Vernonburg or Savannah or whoever, the county does it all the time, every day, every year, on all kind of different issues. So it's all doable.
Okay. So I think this one is addressed directly to you. It
All right.
says, if you don't have much sway on these issues, how would a small city be able to have any influence on, I assume, on lost negotiations or on anything? Okay.
Not
Because I asked that question because I've been told repeatedly, you're almost irrelevant. Your vote is not relevant. You know, so if we don't have influence in your position for the county, what is a small city? What's the influence of a small city that just upset Chatham County? What influence are they going to have?
they're going to have 100% influence on their special service district, which would then, whatever that geographic area is, they would have 100% say-so on the revenue and the services provided. They would have to balance their own budget, and that would be decided by people that live in that geographic area. So where, as your commissioner, you know, I try to make the best decisions I can make on, I wear two hats, a countywide hat, and then I take that off and put on my SSD hat. So I'm the de facto mayor and city council for my district because most of it's unincorporated, but yet I don't have the voting, I only have 1 out of 9 votes. So if I wanted something germane, like, you know, a different police contract, I couldn't do it by myself. I'd have to get 5 other votes. Well, it used to be just 4 other votes, but we found out a few years ago if you had 5, the chairman could veto it and make you have 6 votes. So if I wanted something, I'd need to really make it happen, I got to get 5 other commissioners to vote with me. And we're all different people. We, you know, if I broke up this group in 9 and we threw up an issue and we said, which way do you want to go? it's kind of hard to get that many,
Adam,
two-thirds is that's a supermajority in the U.S. Senate or the Congress to overturn a veto from the president.
Yep.
So that doesn't happen very often.
Just a quick addition to that. You would have 4 more elected officials that you elect than you do today out here, because you're the only elected official out here. Okay? And right next to us is a mayor in a small town that has had one hell of a wallop around the state on what he works to accomplish for Tybee. So you can have a lot of influence even if you're small. You can have, within your city, you could have more to say if they were your own elected officials. That's my opinion.
All right. Jason, how much lost money does Tybee get?
I cheated. He showed me that a minute ago. I'm not smart enough to know this off the top of my head, but we get 1.8 million approximately every year.
1.8 million. Mm-hmm. Okay, for a population of
3,000. What's Skidaway's population?
76, I think, was the last
Closer
one.
to
78.
Yeah,
Okay,
9,
so
9, 10.
multiply that. You're looking at about 7 or 8 million, something like that.
All right. Okay. Another one for you. Do you think Tybee Island would survive as a town or a city without a commercial tax base?
Well, yeah, we don't get any sales tax money back other than what we fight for. Obviously, we have a lot of restaurants and stuff like that would make our quality of life diminish if we had to drive off the island to go do that, buy groceries or go out to dinner or whatever. But financially, because we have such a high-value real estate market, especially like on the beach side of Butler, you're looking at very expensive homes, and most of those homes are not owner-occupied, so therefore they're not subject to Stevens Day or the $200,000 homestead exemption that we have on Tybee for our residents, which means that over half the people on Tybee don't pay a nickel to the city in property taxes.
Is that right? Wow.
Because they've locked in at Stevens Day, they've been there a while. If they locked in at $200,000 or under, or 80%, what is it? $80,000 is taxable, whatever it is. Anyhow, they don't pay. But I think the answer to the question is yes. I think we could survive, but it would diminish the quality of life for the residents out there.
And I'll just ask you, I don't know if you can put a number on this, how much of your property out there is commercial property? They obviously pay property taxes. Is it 10%?
By commercial, do you mean condos and hotels?
Like restaurants.
But are you talking restaurants?
Any non-residential business or any non-residents? How's that?
Maybe 5-7%, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, when you're looking at recurring revenue, you really need to look at your tax digest, because every county, every city, they have a different mix. And it really doesn't matter if you're getting the tax digest of $1 billion off of Elba Island, or if you're getting $1 billion of tax digest from 3,675 nice homes in a particular area. If the tax digest is $1 billion for homes, or $1 billion for an industrial, or $1 billion, $1 billion's $1 billion, $1 million's $1 million. So whatever your mix is, it's really your tax digest. To get all worried about where it's which, who's paying what, you really need to concentrate on how many dollars you have, and if those are enough dollars to provide the services that your local leaders want to provide for you.
And the tax digest is really the value, so that's
the taxable tax digest, because there's so much. 2/7 wrap your mind around this. 2/7 of the tax digest in Chatham County is exempt. That's a huge amount of taxable property that is off the table, and depending on where it's located, it can impact. Obviously, if you're looking strictly from a local government situation, if you got a lot of really nice property that's exempt, such as, all your schools are exempt, all your churches are exempt. Not saying we should ever change that. Your assisted living homes are exempt, no matter how expensive they are. There's just a lot of property that's off the digest. So again, when you're looking at brass tacks of how do you fund your local government, your recurring revenue is your taxable digest, and where it comes from and what combination, everybody's going to be different. You know, some people, you know, it's just different.
So this question is, I think, for the group, and feel free whoever has the knowledge, but it asks, what can a city provide residents of private gated communities?
Nothing. Maybe police protection. The county does provide a dry trash service inside gated communities, but as far as roads, drainage, common areas, anything like that, nothing. Zero.
That's all paid for by your homeowner association fee? Yeah.
And during a hurricane, we had this issue. We have a few private drives. We ended up picking up the cost of debris removal in those areas, and I believe the county picked up that cost, part of it.
We were ill prepared for the volume of Hurricane Matthew that happened in the gated communities. And out of an overabundance of caution, our legal counsel advised us that we had better get all our ducks in a row before we go in and turn our national contractor, because this overwhelmed. You couldn't build a public works big enough to handle a hurricane. The only way you can do it in this coastal area is to have a contract that goes active under certain conditions, and then they come in from all over the country and come in and pick up your debris. Now, FEMA is a great partner. However, you have got to be a very bright legal mind in order to check all the boxes so that you'll get reimbursed, because the county or the city has to fund all that cleanup. But what they're doing simultaneously is making sure all the boxes are checked so they can get reimbursed. By the time we spent $30 to $40 million, I can't remember now, a couple of years ago, 40. All right, $40 million. We got back all but $2 or $3 million is about all it cost out of our local funds. Now, we had to come up with the upfront money, but most of it's come back. Still, there's more to come, but we expect to get reimbursed for nearly all of it. And our reserves were large enough to easily absorb what little bit that the county actually paid, and that's how that situation worked out. Reserves are what every responsible city and county should have. That it's unbudgeted resources. So our current, when I started on the commission, whatever our policy was that we would have 2 months of expenses as reserves. Whatever our expenses were, because we have to do a balanced budget every year, whatever our budget called for expenses, 2 months or 2/12, 1/6 of that would be in a reserve that would be that we would not tap into. Since then, we've gone up to 3 months, both in the M&O and the SSD. So we have a reserve account, and we use that money in emergencies. So if our budget gets blown out by a hurricane or something like that, then if we need to dip into that, it's there.
Just to add on to that,
unbudgeted money put in the bank for a rainy day or a problem.
We didn't used to have this, but we now have almost a year of reserve because
Which
we
is
are
huge.
so exposed,
That-
and we're so dependent upon parking and hotel motel revenue and all that if we get the beach I was thinking of was Mexico City Beach, Florida. If we get annihilated like they did, we are not going to have much revenue other than the property tax revenue that still gets paid. And that would be one piece of advice I would give if this thing happens to go through, is to have a line of credit or something. Because at least that first year, I don't know when it would officially start if it went through.
You have 2 years to become a city.
So are you collecting revenue those 2 years?
If you're providing any services.
Well, just to make sure that because you're exposed too, make sure that you have that, because what you don't want to find yourself in is having to go to get a loan to pay to remove debris, because those people are going to want, citizens are going to want that debris removed like yesterday. You know what I mean? To access their property, you got to be on it immediately. So we had, Matthew cost us $3 million, but we got, we ended up getting almost all of it back. I think we ended up paying 12.5% of the total cost, and we got 75% back from the feds and 12.5% back from the state. But when we picked up that private drive stuff, that was a legal nightmare. Like figuring out, everybody had to sign like an easement to let the trucks in or whatever, because the private drive people wanted us to pay for it, and we said, you got to let us onto your property. So our city attorney was sending emails to everybody on the street and all that, and that was a nightmare. And I would imagine that would be something that you all, as a gated community, would have to figure out.
They'd have to address that. And you know, your city attorney is going to be one very, very important person to make sure that things are set up so that there's not unintended problems.
Yeah. Let's stay right there for a minute. We have a question about funding a startup. Obviously, you're not starting with any money. You're starting at zero. You need money and resources in order to set the city up and get it going. I guess, well, you weren't part of a starting up, but you might know where that goes.
I have no idea how you would do that, but it's been done elsewhere. It's been done in Sandy Springs and everywhere, so it's doable. My recommendation would be, again, if it wanted to go through, to have whoever is going to be in charge to reach out to other cities that started up and figure out how they did it.
There's a tool that all counties, and I probably need a glass of water whenever somebody could find me one.
Need a beer.
There's a tool called a TAN, a tax anticipation note, and cities and counties are in a unique position, unlike corporations and private individuals. They can pretty much borrow against future taxes, because a county commission or a city council has the authority to raise the millage on their tax digest, to raise whatever it is they want to raise. Now, if they get a little out of hand, they may all be packing up and being one term serving the electric. But so banks will loan you money because you are a municipality as a tax anticipation note. I mean, because that's like collateral. That's I mean, what's the old saying? Nothing certain but death and taxes. Well, the banks know that if a municipality borrows money, they have the ability to tax it and get it back.
And I believe the county and the city of Savannah has done that for SPOS funds to get projects started earlier.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We are well over time. I'm going to do 2 more questions, and I'm going to stick around so nobody has to leave. I'm not going to. These guys have stayed over, so it's up to them whether they want to stay. But let's do these 2 questions, and then we'll go off of Facebook, and we can figure it out from there. Jason, first one for you. How big is your city staff itself, not including police or fire? What's it going to take to operate a city, I guess is the question.
We have, include just administrative staff, not the DPW staff, not the police, not the fire, not the lifeguards, about 35 to 40, roughly.
Is that Public Works?
Not Public Works. I mean, you're looking at parking staff also. It's complicated on time because we have a lot of seasonal employees. But if you add it all up, police, fire, everything full-time, a little over 100.
Right. But if you don't have to collect parking fees, you don't have to do police, you don't have to do fire, you don't have to do public works, I think and I'm speaking without the information in front of me, but I think the feasibility study said 6 or 7 was what they could get by with on Skidaway.
You probably could if it's a less complicated government to run, then yeah. Okay. Absolutely. So if you're not dealing with fire and police.
All right.
Our biggest percentage of the expenses out of our budget, the biggest one is police, the second one is fire.
Okay. Last question for the stream here is, how can a serious study to incorporate be done without upside and downside, and a thought out revenue and expenditure stream based on proposals for services? So I think the question was, is the feasibility study is pretty thin. Is everybody confident in what the numbers were, and are those numbers gospel?
Who did the study? Carl Vinson?
For Skidaway, it was the Georgia State, Andrew Young.
I have no idea how to answer that question.
These are state mandated steps that any group that wants to incorporate does by state law. Why, and they pay, I think what I've heard is around $30,000 for this study. I have confidence in the Carl Vinson Institute. I've had a lot of workings with them over my years. I have not seen much out of the Georgia State, but when I looked over the feasibility studies, they all made sense to me financially, that what they looked at for revenue and what they looked at expenses, if anything, they looked like they were kind of conservative, because they don't know, like especially for Skidaway, I mean, they were looking at typical cities that size, but Skidaway is anything but typical, because there's very little crime there, because the access is so limited. You don't have and there's so little opportunities on the island for a lot of different kind of crimes, and it's just not prevalent. Our county statistics will show you that all day long for many, many decades. Yeah. So I would say if somebody had a question about the feasibility study, pull out the question and let's bore into it. The county is will more than gladly tell you whatever, answer any question about revenue or services to the best of their ability. We have a really good accounting staff, and we don't have any secrets. Transparency is there.
They're very responsive. Yeah.
So, and you can ask the paper. They ask for something, 2 or 3 days they get it, and the chips fall where they'd fall. Right. So I would say, if you don't have confidence in some part of it, just pick it out and do the research, and whatever the county can do to help fill in the blanks, then we certainly will do that.
Okay. Well, we're going to log off now. Before I do that, I wanted to mention the savannahnow.com. We have, for those of you that don't subscribe to the paper, we have a pretty special offer going on right now. 99 cents the first month. I think $8.99 after. I'm butchering it. See, they changed it on me. First month free, $7.99 after that. And if you're interested in that, go to savannahnow.com. Digital only offer. Good to go if non-subscribers. So you don't have to be a subscriber to the paper to get that deal. So thanks everybody for coming. And I'm going to stick around, and we got some more questions. So if we want to go through these questions, we can.